From Boise to Middleton, the 5A and 4A Southern Idaho Conferences feature 20 of the largest schools in Idaho. Highlighting the big plays and big stories from Idaho's biggest schools, this is the SIC Prepcast with Wayne Dzubak.
That's right. It's another edition of the SIC Prepcast on IdahoSports.com. And for the first time in a couple weeks, Wayne Dzubak back in action. Wayne, how are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, sorry to miss a couple of weeks, but we had a lot of stuff going on here. We had new flooring put in, new carpeting put in, and it wasn't so much that, I was just displaced. And we had worker bees in here. They were pounding away, making all kind of noise and finishing floors, and it was a mess. And I'm thinking, man, where do I go to do this? So I appreciate Logan Green and you kind of taking over for me for a couple of weeks. It's been crazy. Plus, your mind is like everywhere but on what's going on. So it was crazy, but it's all done, all said there. Now got a couple of decorations up, ready to rock and roll for Christmas. So we're finally gotten our focus where it needs to be.
Okay, I was going to ask you, are you one of the guys that goes all out with the Christmas lights, or are you kind of more of a minimalist?
Yeah, more of a minimalist. I think, in the past we've gone all out a little bit, but I'm trying to keep it simpler. But a lot of it was because, in that process, part of the problem was that we have to move all the furniture out of rooms, back into rooms. So cars out in the driveway, not in the garage, because you got the whole living room furniture sets in there and stuff like that. And somebody said, well, why didn't you pay a mover $500 to do it? Why did you do it yourself? And I said, well, you just answer that question yourself when you said $500. So, yeah.
Yeah, I hear you there for sure.
So if anything else, I may be a minimalist, not only in lights, but also in cash.
Yeah, right. For sure. Well, with Wayne Dzubak, I'm Brandon Baney for the SIC Prepcast, breaking down everything going on in the 5A and 4A SIC. And the action has really been heating up, especially on the basketball floor. Let's start with the girls, because Wayne, you were at a really good crosstown game last week between Boise and Borah in girls basketball. And to me, it was kind of a shift in the tide. I think going in, a lot of people thought Boise would come out on top, but Borah won a low-scoring game.
Yeah, they did. 37-34 was the final score, and you're right, because Boise came into that game overall 7-1, and and Borah was 5-2, and so you had that game where all of a sudden you're 5-3 and they're 8-1. That's a big shift instead of 7-2 and 6-2. So it makes a big difference in what happened, and so the fact that Borah won that game was huge. What I really impressed though, Boise. And they've got a big game coming up, actually, as we do this tonight. They're playing Mountain View, so that's going to be a tough one. It'll be on IdahoSports.com. So if you end up seeing this before, real quick, then you'll be able to watch that game or hear that game tonight. But the bottom line is that they have an Ashley Banks who's 6'5", and what a presence she was down low. She fouled out of that game. I mean, Borah did a good job of double teaming her, keeping her away from the bucket. And as a result, she ended up getting 5 fouls. She was out of the ball game, but not till late. So it wasn't a big factor in that regard. But the win by Borah was huge, 37-34. I like Borah basically is a pretty good, solid team. I think Boise may be a little bit stronger in the talent end of it. But boy, I'll tell you what, Borah did what they had to do that night.
It's really fascinating to me because right now the league is kind of split. To me, there's a clear top 6. And then there's the rest. Timberline, Mountain View, Borah, Owyhee, Boise, and I would include Rocky Mountain in there. I think they're still a dark horse, but all of these teams are going to beat up on each other as the season goes along. The only team that's unscathed still at this point is Timberline.
Oh, absolutely. And Timberline is the team that has already beaten Boise and Borah, the two we talked about. That was the one thing they had in common going into that game, that they had both lost to Timberline, who is now 8-0 overall, 6-0 in league play. So sitting atop the Foothills division, and then you've got Boise, as you mentioned, and then down in the river. How about Owyhee? Now, we'll talk about boys in a minute, but the boys are doing great. I did a game the other day I'll talk about, but the Owyhee girls are doing great. They're 6-1, 5-0 in league. And, for a first-year school, man, they have come out of the blocks going crazy.
Yeah, and for Mountain View, the big news came out that Naya Ojukwu had unfortunately, torn her ACL and would be out for the season. And I think everybody thought, okay, well, they're done. Well, they're not done. They're 7-1, and they're proving that they've got a good coach and a good system, and they're not just a one-player team.
No, they're not. They're hanging in there. There's, like you said, 7-1. They're doing a good job. They're making up for it. The big thing that you do in transition, they did lose a game without her, but what they're doing in transition, who steps up? We talk about next person up, next man up. In this case, next lady up. Who's going to make that happen? And so they had to figure out how to get that done. You see it so often when, especially in basketball, where you have 5 people out there, you lose one. It's a key element of the whole chemistry. And so they had to figure out who's going to step up, get that done. And if they can figure it out, they may not be quite as good as they would be with Nia in there, but I think they're still going to be a contender and take it right down to the line.
Yeah, and then if we look at the 4A girls basketball standings super quick, you'll see Middleton with an overall record of 5-6, and they're actually ranked in this week's coaches poll. And people are scratching their heads going, how is Middleton ranked at 5-6? Well, their 6 losses have come to 4 5A schools, Borah, Rocky, Eagle, and Boise. And they've also lost to Preston, which is a top 5 4A team, and Sugar Salem, the top ranked team in 3A. That's how they're 5-6 and ranked.
Well, plus they're undefeated in league. So, I mean, they're right there. You go there. So you got all these games. And I hand it to the coaches. I mean, when you take on 5A teams and you're a 4A team and you're going that way, you're kind of looking down the road to see when Middleton does go to 5A to see what you can do. But you're really stepping it up. You're going to be a better ball club than you were at the end of the year because you played these games. And people are going to forget you lost them. They're going to forget that. And it all comes down to what you do in league. And they're 4-0 in league, and they're getting it done. Right there with them, as always, is BK at 3-1, getting the job done. So, it's still that Middleton, BK. And how about Columbia stepping in there? They're 5-2 overall, 3-1 in league. So those 3 teams right now look like they're going to battle it out all season long. And it's fun to watch. But I hand it to the Middleton Gals for taking on a pretty tough schedule right off the get-go. And then hanging in there, not hanging their head. And they had some injuries, Brandon. They had a couple of injuries early on. Not because I'm not saying they couldn't have beaten a couple of those 5A teams, but they lost a couple of key players, key elements, and you know how tough that is.
Yeah, they went to the Preston Indians Classic last week in Preston and lost to Preston in the semifinals, and then lost to Sugar Salem by 2 in the 3rd place game. So that's how they're 5-6. Columbia is a really fun team. They've got the Robertson sisters. They made state for the first time ever last year. I think they've got a good chance to go back to back. Head coach Neil Robertson is doing a great job, and don't sleep on Columbia. They're going to be a good team to watch as the season moves along.
Yeah, when I say that, you better not sleep on them. Now, I haven't seen them, so I don't know exactly. Yeah, obviously, I think you've seen them more than I have, and so you have a better handle on them. But yeah, I look at their record and I'm going, wow, they're right there. And it's good to see Columbia because Columbia's been around for not a long time. They're one of those, what I call, you got the old schools that have been around forever, the brand new ones that are just coming on board. They're somewhere in the middle, but they've never been like, oh, wow, that's Columbia. Watch out for Columbia. I think this women's team right here can say, hey, watch out. We're pretty darn good.
Speaking of new schools on the block, Owyhee, let's shift to the 5A boys basketball conversation. They have come in with the mantle. They were picked number 1 in the preseason poll. They've been atop the coaches' polls. They're 2-1. Their one loss was to American Fork, Utah. And again, the Utah schools have about a 10-day jump start on the Idaho schools in terms of competition. But otherwise, I don't know. We know too much about this Owyhee team because they've beaten CUNA and Centennial, 2 teams that I think are middle of the pack.
Tell you what I did. I did the game the other night against Centennial, and what I know about them is that they are young. They've got 1 senior, and that is Jack Payne, who came over from Boise. He had 11 points the other night in a big win by Owyhee. They won easily. I can't remember the exact, like 74-45, something like that. So it was a big, easy win. Liam Campbell, just a young kid. He came in there, had 27 points. He's a sophomore. And then they had a guy named Jackson Rasmussen, who's a freshman. But get this, he's 6'7". Now, Andy Harrington coming over from Middleton, first-year coach. If all I knew is that I had a 6'7" freshman and they've got a 6'3" freshman, and they played them both a lot the other night, I think I would have been pretty happy, and feel pretty safe about making the move from Middleton to Owyhee with Jack Payne and Liam Campbell with those 27 points. They had five players in double figures. So, I mean, I was really impressed with what they do. I talked to Andy Harrington after the game, and he said, we're starting to come together. We're really, really young. were starting to come together. And I said, well, if you're starting to come together, people better watch out when you do come together because you're going to be really tough.
I mean, this is a team chock full of Division I talent. Jack Payne has committed to Colorado State. Rams, by the way, 10-0 and in the top 25. They're a pretty good program, Colorado State. And then Liam Campbell and Rasmussen, you mentioned it, but both of those guys are also getting Division I interest already as underclassmen. So
Rasmussen's a freshman.
Yeah.
So they're looking at these little babies going, yeah, okay, he's got 4 more years or 3 more years, I guess, plus this year. So that's 4. And they're already talking about him. But what I liked about him is that Coach Harrington put him in early in the ball game. They had both freshmen in there. They had 2 freshmen, a sophomore, and I think a junior in there one time. I'm like, and then Jack Payne. And I'm going, really? And they're just moving the ball up and down the court. They were pretty impressive.
Let me ask you about Centennial, because Centennial was picked 6th in the preseason coaches poll, and that kind of raised my eyebrows a little bit because it's been a year or two since Centennial was really in the mix. But obviously in the preseason, the coaches thought pretty highly of the Patriots. I mean, it's hard to tell when you're playing one of the best in Hawaii, but what did you see from Centennial?
Well, what I saw from Centennial was the ability to move the basketball around the court, get the open shot. They just couldn't put it in the ocean. That was really the problem on the Saturday night when I did that game. In fact, I used the old quote from former Boise State coach Bobby Dye. Bobby Dye, he went, and I said Idaho State because I'm thinking about you being a Pocatello, and Bobby, was at Idaho State as well. But Bobby Dye used to say, you can analyze, you can scrutinize, you can do everything you want to do about basketball, but if you can't put the brown thing in the round thing, you're not going to win the ball game. And so Centennial got a lot of open shots, got a lot of nice looks down low. Nothing would fall. And yes, they had some pressure. Yes, maybe there was some good defense from Hawaii, but Centennial had enough looks at the basket that I guarantee you that Josh Opperspy, their coach, if he would say the same thing I would, he said, we just didn't put the ball in the hoop. That was so simple. We just didn't score. It was one of those 25% shooting nights that you can't explain.
Mountain View was picked 2nd in the preseason coaches poll there, 3-0, 2-0 in the league. And then Eagle's a team that you've seen up close and in person, Wayne, when they played Middleton. That was a 5A, 4A matchup, right?
Yeah, they got Donovan Jones. They've got Gage Jones, both guys that we talked a lot about. They were key players on the football team. Donovan Jones, big tight end. He's a factor down there, and they are getting really good. Now, next Tuesday night on the 21st, I will call that game as well as they host Hawaii. So an Eagle and Hawaii next Tuesday night, the 21st. That should be a good one, and it will tell us a lot more about what's going on in boys basketball. But I thought Eagle looked pretty good. They played Middleton. That's the game I did. It was at Middleton, and I got to really hand it to Eagle to go to Middleton and play a 4A school on their home court. They went down there, they played them. It was a tight game all the way until about 4 minutes to go in the ball game. And Eagle built a 6-point. They got a little bit of a run. They built a 6-point lead, and then the old shot clock, controversy comes into play because as soon as that happened, as soon as they got that 6-point lead, Brandon, they held the ball. They worked the clock. They milked the clock. And all of a sudden it became a different ball game. It was up and down, back and forth, but it was tie. Middleton leads, Eagle leads, back and forth. So, I got to hand it to Eagle. Once they got that 6-point lead, they had enough respect for Middleton. They didn't want to play that up and down game. They wanted to say, okay, we're going to play the takeaway game.
Yeah, and again, I don't begrudge the coach for doing that. I begrudge the system and the rule that's in place that allows them to do that.
Yeah, it became a little more boring of a game, but it was going to assure that Eagle was going to win that puppy, and that's, I guess, what you got to do.
That's right. Let's talk about Middleton as we transition to 4A boys basketball in the SIC. Middleton, the defending 4A state champs, lost 4 of their 5 starters. Tyler Medeiros, the only starter that's back, but he's a good one, 6'7" inside. And now it's kind of this bench crew that played valuable minutes at state last year. It's these guys that were on the bench that are now in the starting lineup. How did Middleton look?
Middleton looks good. Tyler Medeiros didn't have the kind of game that I thought he might have at all in that game against Eagle, but he played well. But Michael Day, he's a 6'10" kid, and he was a sophomore last year, a junior this year. He looked good. They got Gravitt at the point guard. He's just solid. Middleton is very, very good. They're very, very solid. They started off the year against 2. Matter of fact, the Eagle game was their 3rd 5A team in a row. And they had played the first 2 on the road, and they won both those games. And they had Eagle on the ropes. They really did. And I think if Tyler Medeiros had just a little bit better game, was a little bit stronger down low, and maybe you hand it to the Donovan Jones guys and the Gage Jones for keeping him off the glass. But I think if Tyler had a little better game, Middleton might have won that one. Not putting it all on him by any stretch of the imagination. Eagle probably a little better ball club, but boy, I like what I see in Middleton, and watch out. I mean, like we said, they're 4-0 in league, so they're right there.
So yeah, Middleton 3-1, Bishop Kelly 4-1, Valley View 3-1. I think people coming in assumed or said that that's the top three. And
yeah, Valley View looks good.
Yeah.
You know, Valley View, they play some 5A competition too, and they played them really strong. So we hadn't talked much about Valley View, but yeah, like you said, BK, Middleton, Valley View, all of them right there. Any one of them can have it. And the nice thing is it's early in the season. We haven't really seen them gel yet as to where they can be. We're still in that Christmas holiday mode. Get through Christmas, get through the holidays, and then January 2nd, get serious. You know, that's kind of where they're all at. Yeah.
And for those three teams I just mentioned, it's really the same problem everybody in 4A basketball is having. It's the Preston problem. How do we solve this juggernaut that is Preston? Preston went to the Treasure Valley last week, Wayne, and beat BK and Valley View on back-to-back nights, Friday and Saturday. And so while they look good in the Treasure Valley, when you compare them to Preston, there's still a little work to be done.
Yeah. And I mean, Preston, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the fact that in the wintertime in Preston, what do? You play basketball. You know, beautiful area, but you play basketball. And they love basketball there, and they eat basketball up down there. And as a result, you know, there's a tradition there. And when you grow up as a kid in Preston, you go, I want to be on that basketball team. And so you work hard to be there. And when you get there, you do a good job. So they're always going to be good, and they're always right there. And so I don't know what you do with them. I mean, hand it to Preston. I mean, Preston just makes it happen year in and year out, and it's a tradition, and it's, you know, something that they make happen.
Now, I'm pretty excited, Wayne. We'll be broadcasting the Preston Indians Classic this week on IdahoSports.com, and some of those teams from the Treasure Valley are going to be coming over to Preston, so I will get to see these teams up close and in person. Columbia is going to be there. Nampa will be there, and CUNA, a 5A school, is also going to come over and compete. So.
No, I think that's going to be great, and we'll be putting that on IdahoSports.com. That'll be fun. I always like to see that. I'm going to be busy over at the Hawaii tournament. We've got the smaller schools. They've got bigger schools, smaller schools. We're going to be video streaming the smaller schools that they have there, and I don't have them all right here. Yeah, I do. I've got Castleford's going to take on West Side right off the get-go, and that's on Thursday at 3:30 to start it off. Then St. Mary's and Malad will go at it at 5 o'clock. Ambrose School and Homedale following that one. And then the final one at 8 o'clock, Aberdeen against McCall Donnelly. So that's my lineup for Thursday over at Owyhee High School. It's going to be in the back gym, if you want to call it the auxiliary gym, I guess, but it's going to be fun. So they'll have two basketball tournaments going on at once. And of course, we're going to be video streaming the smaller schools, and that'll be a kick for me. I haven't seen any of these guys. I'm looking forward to it. I'm starting to get rosters and talking to ADs today. Looking forward to doing those games.
Yeah, I'll tell you one guy to keep an eye out for. You're going to really love the way he handles the ball. It's the point guard for Ambrose. His name is Johnny Sugarman. He's the son of head coach Ken Sugarman, and he is a slick ball handler, and he can really stroke it from beyond the arc too.
So what you're telling me is Johnny Sugarman?
Yeah, Johnny Sugarman.
Johnny Sugarman, you're saying he's got a sweet game?
Oh yeah, you're gonna like it. I think you're gonna appreciate his style of play. So
well, I'm looking forward to it because sometimes they don't get as much press as the other guys do, the big teams do, and of course since we do the 5A, 4A, we're always talking about those guys, and I'm just so excited to have an opportunity. When Paul Kingsbury, our boss, our CEO, our king, when he called me up and said, "Hey, can you do the smaller games?" I said, "Sure, I would love to. It's going to be fun."
Yeah. And of course there's a larger tournament going on at Owyhee as well. You'll have like Blackfoot and Pocatello will be there. You've got some schools from the north coming down. It's like 5A, 4A.
Lake City's going to be there, and I think Post Falls is going to be there. Emmett's actually going to be in that one as well. So that'll be interesting to see what they do. So yeah, that's going to be fun. That'll be going on in the other gym. But what's really cool is I get to do that Malad game. My wife is from Malad, graduated Malad. She's a Dragon. and I don't mean that. I mean that in the nicest sense, she's a dragon, but she went there. So it's always fun to watch, where she came from.
Well, that's where this whole Preston thing started, was in Malad. Tyler Jones, the coach at Preston, his father was Terry Jones, legendary coach at Malad.
Those are all my wife's friends. Yeah, they're all buddies. Yeah. It's a small town. They all still hang out together.
For sure. Well, it's kind of fun to diverge off the 5A, 4A path for a second. Let's get back on it, though, and let's talk about the first wrestling coaches poll of the season. Came out last week. And at the 5A poll, the first poll of the season, it's kind of more about just like respect, I think, to the teams that did well the year prior, because results are few and far between. So Meridian, the 5A champions last year, part of that renaissance, right? Boys basketball won the title, football did really well, and wrestling, of course, won the 5A title last year. They were the top team in the poll. CUNA was ranked third. Rocky Mountain was ranked fifth. Of those three, I think CUNA is the team that has the most potential.
Yeah, I think so. I haven't seen a whole lot on them, but I agree. And you're right about Meridian. I mean, there's been a renaissance at Meridian High School. The Warriors really getting it going. In fact, coming up the 28th, 29th, and 30th, I've got 3 basketball games where Meridian hosts Post Falls, Lake City, and Coeur d'Alene. Not necessarily in that order. I don't know which order, but they have 3 different nights in a row. So it's the North versus the South. And it's going to be interesting to see if Meridian can, because they went 20-1 last year. They lost some key players, what they can do. But you're right. It seemed like it's trickled down. Football did great. Wrestling's doing great. And I agree. But CUNA, that's an area the cavemen have always been tough on the wrestling mat. They've always had that. And I talked about the tradition of basketball of Preston. I think that's true with CUNA and their feeling about the wrestling program.
Yeah. 4A coaches poll, Nampa was ranked 1. Columbia was ranked 5th. Nampa is a legitimate 4A state title contender. They had a lot of underclassmen win state titles last year, and Columbia kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, and on Nampa, I got to say this because, again, I'm still, studying up on them. But all I can say about Nampa is that they're a bunch of bulldogs. I mean, they just come at you, and you know how a bulldog fights. They never give up. So they're going to be fun to watch this year.
For sure. So that's kind of our winter sports update. We did get a little bit of news as it pertains to the fall sports calendar this past week, Wayne. The big news that came out last week was the All-State Volleyball teams from 5A all the way down to 1A D1 were handed out, and no surprise at the 5A level, Skyview kind of cleaned house.
Oh, it knocked me over with a broom or something, because I mean they had 5 All-State players. They had 3 on the first team. They had the player of the year in Eden Bauer, and they also had the coach of the year in Kevin Murphy. So, I mean, Skyview, if I got their record right, 37-2 overall. That includes some tournaments where they went down to Las Vegas. They played some really tough teams. I mean, the only teams they lost to was the team from Marin, California. And, you know how tough those California teams can be. And they lost one from Mountain View of Utah, not Mountain View of Idaho, Mountain View of Utah. So those are the only 2 losses, but congratulations to them. Alex Azevedo was on the first team. Alex Bauer was also on the first team. So they had 5 players named All-State. So congratulations. And we've talked about them before, how good they are. But Skyview, that just came out late last week. So we wanted to mention it here on the podcast. So congratulations to Coach Murphy and Eden Bauer, Player of the Year and Coach of the Year, respectively.
Yeah. And they got so many underclassmen. I mean, we're going to be talking about Skyview volleyball for a while. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And then the other news that came out, and this came out just yesterday, Tuesday afternoon, another longtime football coach in the Treasure Valley decided to hang up his whistle.
It's been one of those falls where all of a sudden, you've had the guys like Todd Simmons at Capital for 18 years, Judd Benedick for 15 years at Mountain View. And all of a sudden, Simmons decides to retire for whatever reason. Actually, he just said it was time. It was the right thing to do for the family, Judd Benedick said. He hasn't said much about it, but he did tell some people that it was a hard decision to resign from Mountain View after 15 years and a 116-42 record. But he said, it was the right time to do the right thing for my family. And I mean, unbelievable. I mean, 13 state appearances. In 2016, they won their first crown as they beat Capital 48-21 for the championship there. They were in 7 semifinal showdowns out of those 13 years. So, This year was a little tough. They went 9-0, and then they had a first-round bye, and then they lost to Meridian, the team they had beaten by 1 point to start the season. But Meridian, by that time, had become really good and had their quarterback back and had revenge on their minds. And so they came in there really tight. They did that game as well. But Judd Benedick, let me tell you this about Judd. Whenever I would just call him up and say, hey, I need an interview, I want to talk about 5A football, he said, come on over, just meet me at the side door. And I go, knock, 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 and he'd come answer the door. We sit in his office and just talk about everything under the sun. What a great guy. He was always there for me, and I really appreciate that. And those two guys, Simmons and Benedict, are going to be really, really missed because they were the class of high school football coaches. We've got great football coaches, but those two guys, I mean, boy, that's a lot of years. What's that, 33 years, if I do the math real correct, that they've been around combined, and we're going to miss those guys.
And you're kind of seeing this gradual changing of the guard in the SIC, right? Capital and Mountain View will both have new head coaches next year. This year, you had a new coach at Borah, JQ Canyon. Owyhee obviously had a new coach because they're a new school, and CUNA had a new coach as Sherm Blaser left for Owyhee. 2 years ago, Boise and Centennial had first-year coaches. Exactly. Matt Green at Centennial, Mike Altieri at Boise. And, even like Chris Kulig at Rocky Mountain, he's a longtime coach, but not a head coach. I think this was his 5th season as Rockies coach this past year.
Yeah, so, he's become like the senior dude.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think of like who the elder statesman would be. Ian Sparnt maybe at Timberline, Coach Young at Skyview, of course, but they're moving down to 4A. So I think as Middleton moves up next year, Bill Brock has been at Middleton for a really long time. He might be the most tenured member.
Yeah. I like the way that you say elder statesman and I go senior dude.
That's right. That's right. Age is just a number, except when you're a football coach. Every year, it's like adding 2 years.
Yeah. If it weren't for immaturity, I would be a whole lot older.
That's right. Well, that was a good jam-packed prepcast today, Wayne. There was a lot of news to break down and a lot of things to cover. And again, as we're talking about things, especially with basketball results, by the time you're listening to this, games that we're talking about may have gone final. So your best bet is to go to IdahoSports.com each and every morning. I always start my day off by going and checking the scores and the standings because we'll have all the latest info each and every day. So IdahoSports.com, just check it out every day. There's always something new.
And don't forget about the pictures. If your kid is playing any sport, we've got pictures all over the place. We've got that file there. Go to photos. There's nothing more fun than seeing your kid on the court and having that picture right there, and you could get one for yourself, and that's kind of cool. So there's so much more than just the games on the air. We talk about doing them, but there's so much there, and you can follow along with us and these podcasts. We've got podcasts not only the 5A, 4A like we just did, but I guess you do what, 6 every week?
Yeah, we're down to 5 now.
Down to 5, okay.
Trim the fat a little bit, but yeah, 5 a week. Still a lot.
Too much Brandon Baney, huh? Say break it down to 5.
Yes. Yeah, people emailed and said enough of this guy already.
Never happened.
Yeah. Well, thanks for tuning into this week's edition of the SIC Prepcast. Wayne, have fun at the Owyhee tournament, covering some of those 2A, 1A, 3A schools. It's going to be a lot of fun.
And you enjoy Preston. We'll keep track of what you're doing down there.
All right. Sounds great. For Wayne Dzubak, I'm Brandon Baney. We'll see you next time on IdahoSports.com.